bass compression. This is something that has been on my fucking mind for years, and I really, really hope to be able to shed some light, perhaps bust some myths, and basically explain how and why you would use a compressor. If you don't understand what you're going for, what compression is, how to use it, and even if you want it in some cases, you're basically just leading a blind race to fucking nowhere. And I'm really passionate about this topic. It has eaten at me for a long, long, long time because I've found that a lot of videos give you a demo on what a compressor perhaps does or how it subtly, I guess, sounds like. And you kind of walk away from that video, well, I do anyway, walk away from that video knowing fuck all, and in some cases having more of a scrambled head than what you went in to begin with. First and foremost, I want to be able to explain why you would use a compressor, because as mentioned, if you don't know why you want one, you're basically fucked. You could spend 10 minutes dialing knobs thinking that something's happening, and it's not. So understanding the sound of a compressor is one thing. Understanding how it's built and what it does is another thing, and understanding when and where and why you would use one is the icing on the cake for me. Specifically, what happens for me live and recording is I'll be chugging like a madman on a B string tuned to A or an E string tuned down to D. And then if I had to tap or slap on, say, the D or G strings, I get fuck all. I get donuts, I get no bottom end, and I get no volume. So I was unable to understand what was actually happening. And it really done my fucking head in because I couldn't understand why I had so much boom in the low end and I had literally fuck all on the G and D string. So the answer to this, a little bit of EQ helps, yes, but the answer to this is compression. But it's not just slap a fucking compressor on it and it'll all be okay. It's what type of compressor, what you're trying to achieve, and how you're using that compressor. So I want to start with this Cali 76 compressor that I'm holding. One of the best, or I would argue the best pedal compressors ever made. Definite rack mount quality. Could I hear the difference of this and something that was $5,000 rack mount, for example? It'd be very difficult for me. I'd call this super high-end, world class. The cool thing about this particular compressor and why I have it is it's a FET compressor. FET compression is notoriously fast, but you don't get that speed without a trade-off. In this example, you get color. But I would argue that the color of this compressor, as well as the usability, is fucking incredible because of its fullness and roundness and oomph. The UREI 76 that it's modeled off, that was a go-to compressor in the world. I mean, things like Neve and, you know, the 1176, they don't have a household name globally if they're not incredible and if they're not sought after. So I'm absolutely stoked with this thing, and the color that it adds, reamped, blended back with the original signal is a warmth like I've almost never heard. And how I know this so vividly, I actually recorded a cover of Tool's The Grudge, and there were parts in my recording that were very tinny and parts that were very fat and full, but playing that song, I had this compressor on the input, but where the magic happened is capturing my recorded part and using this compressor on the reamp. Now, what is absolutely mind-blowing about a pedal compressor is it has a line out, a balance line out of a pedal compressor is incredible. So you're getting minimal noise, you can push the cable a lot longer length if you want, and I would argue any line signal over an unbalanced in the reamp world, which is what I specifically used this for. I mean, there's hundreds of uses, but we're talking about use with intent. I would argue that that's incredible. Now, where the magic really happened, at the start of Tool's The Grudge, you're on the D and G string specifically. You know, you don't have, well, I didn't have a lot of bottom end, and I've slapped a lot through that song and switched between fingering and chugging, you know, and slapping. So I rode this pedal live through the reamp and really crunched the intro to where it brought the spikes or the peaks. It wasn't so much limiting, but what I wanted to do was be able to get a bit more bottom end and bring the quieter parts in and really gel them in so it sounded like a more uniform track as opposed to something quite tinny. Now, one critical thing to note when doing this is setting the attack and release times. It's fucking everything with compression. It is everything. If you don't understand your attack and release times, you are stabbing in the dark. In a nutshell, attack and release is how quickly this compressor is working and how slowly or fast it is releasing. Now, too much and you'll squash a signal and kill it. Too little and it'll do fuck all, and you'll watch the meter and think something's happening, but fuck all is happening. And we learnt this, so don't get thrown with the decibel meter of a pedal, because you really have to look, but you have to listen as to what it's doing. So I would argue that using a pedal live as opposed to using it in a reamp situation, the understanding is tenfold. The difference is tenfold, and it is very significant. If you want to understand how to use a compressor and why it works, get a riff that you don't think sounds right, reamp it, play with your input, play with your output if you want to set them at unity gain. I mean, there are all sorts of settings and reasons why people use compression, but once again, I really want to mention that I'm using this with an intent, with a purpose. So the attack and release times at the intro of the song were way different to the verse because I had some quite technical slapping parts that moved really quickly to finger-style chugging parts. Now, these had to be brought together, and I really had to crunch the fuck out of them to be able to, you know, make them uniform, blended with the main track. And I mean, we had the attenuating dBs, you know, over 20, 21, well over that, which some people would have a heart attack and think, oh no, it's compressing the shit out of it. It's not that you shouldn't watch your dials, but you should also feel and hear what you want from the actual compressor. So in terms of using this for Tool, I was also able to ride the reamp live in order to play with the attack and release in a way that I could I could choose when I wanted it faster and slower, when I wanted it crunched more, and that for me was a way to be able to understand this pedal, how compression works, how a FET compressor sounds, and to achieve a desired result. So that's the way I used, just one example, I used this pedal. And I think this is one of the best sounding, best made, easiest useful compressors on the market. It's very much so a piece of bling. And if you were looking for something to add colour, I would definitely go this. But it's really fucking cool to be able to experience such an amazing rack mount, world-class quality compressor in a pedal. So can't speak highly enough for this, and using it with an intent will give you a massive understanding over just blindly fucking plugging in and it's choking the sound a little bit. I mean, sound demos of compressor pedals are great, but if you're not using it with an intent, you come out of there with less info than or scrambled info than what you walked in with. So I'm really hoping to shed some light on how and why this pedal can be used. Fucking awesome, absolutely awesome.